make America great again. How can you be against?
We are not going back.
Welcome to Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey, and I am here today with James Hohmann and Rhonda Colvin. We hope you all had a great Thanksgiving holiday, and it's so good to see both of you. We've been away for only 2 weeks, which already in this new Trump era feels like a millennia or something. Welcome back, Rhonda. I'm so relieved you made it back from Ohio and all the snow.
Yes, those who are in Ohio and in the Great Lakes region have like feet that they are shoveling out of their driveways right now. And an Alberta Clipper that just came and added more snow. So winter is certainly there in Ohio. And I was able to get back, though. I had a small window to drive back.
A Good Samaritan helped you out?
Yes, I got stuck, even though I have, four-wheel drive. And I'm usually able to, drive well in Ohio. That's where I'm from. I know the landscape. But no, it was really tough, actually. So my thoughts are with the people up there, because it is kind of, it's hard to get groceries. Things are closed.
Didn't you say your family's home has now 7 feet of snow?
Yeah, when I left, it was about 5.
I mean, guys, that's like how tall I am.
I
That's
say
like a
it very-
Libby of snow. I'm like 5 something. That's a Libby's worth of snow.
Yeah, I'm no meteorologist, although I love weather. And I also told my family 2 days before this snow fell, I told them, you guys, we need to go to the grocery store. But it was like Thanksgiving night, and we're like, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Yeah, no. It was very hard to get around. But, what scares me is this is so early, and we still have months to go now of winter. So we'll see where all goes.
James, good Thanksgiving?
Great. We went to a Ravens game in Baltimore on Sunday night, and there were snow flurries, which was just enough snow to be really fun. And we had hand warmers and hot chocolate.
I was going to say,
seats.
that's the
Ravens
postcard
lost
snow.
to the Eagles, but it was a really fun game experience.
I also had a lot of hot chocolate over Thanksgiving and dragged the family to a turkey trot, which has now become a tradition. And my nieces and nephews were willing participants, made some new friends, and so it was a good time.
I did a turkey trot here, and it was pouring rain, so hopefully it wasn't raining on you guys.
Just freezing. Well, it's time to get back to work.
Yeah.
And really, we've already been back at work for days now.
Did we leave?
Yeah. Rhonda was on Capitol Hill chasing Donald Trump's nominees, people who were hoping to be in his cabinet. There are some questions, though, about how everyone's going to get through. So much else to talk about. On the Hill today, as we record, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are talking about Doge. That's the Department of Government Efficiency. They're meeting with Republicans behind closed doors. And then we're watching to see if people like Pete Hegseth, who Donald Trump wants to be the defense secretary, is able to save his nomination. It seems to be hanging by a thread, or is it? Is he managing to pull out more and more prospects of being able to become the defense secretary? Donald Trump is also taking this time right now to get ready to become president on January 20th. Now, he isn't president quite yet, and people seem to be forgetting that. The man who is Joe Biden is visiting world leaders on an overseas trip. It's not getting a lot of attention. He also made the surprise decision over the weekend to pardon his son Hunter, despite months and months of insistence that he would not do that. So in this time of transition, let's start with the incoming president's proposed cabinet picks. Rhonda, you were on the Hill yesterday chasing Pete Hegseth and chasing the senators who he was talking to. Let's just review the latest reporting that's come out, because it's been quite damaging to both his reputation and his prospects, James.
Yeah, so there have been a series of stories. The Trump team did not know in advance about a payment of hush money to a woman who accused Hegseth of rape. No criminal charges were filed, and there was an out-of-court settlement. Pete Hegseth says the encounter was consensual in 2017 when he was with his now third wife, who had just had a baby, but he was still married to his second wife. There have been other revelations, including the New Yorker reporting that he was forced out of 2 different veterans organizations because of concerns about mismanagement and drinking, bad behavior on the job. NBC and the Post have reported that he was widely known as a heavy drinker during his time as an anchor at Fox News, often, according to their sources, drunk on the job. And so a series of drip, drip, drip. And then I think maybe the one that got the most buzz was a New York Times story over the weekend about his mom sending him an email in 2018 while he was going through a divorce, basically saying, you're an abuser of women, you're a bad guy, basically. The mom going on Fox to try and clean it up. The mom actually calling Republican senators to say her son is a changed man. But that we know from reporting really bothered Donald Trump. And it's one of the reasons I think over the weekend, going into early this week, his nomination was perceived as really wobbly. Donald Trump lost his brother to alcoholism. Trump himself does not drink. I think he's sort of acutely sensitive to the perception that this guy's a heavy drinker, and also a feeling that they were sort of caught off guard, which Trump doesn't like. And so that's the firestorm that Hegseth has gone into on Capitol Hill, that Rhonda was very much part of the whirl, the swirl, whatever you want to call it, up there yesterday.
Yeah, and he's back today, too. So this is now multiple days he's been in front of senators, even went to the House side, which the House doesn't really have any role in confirming any presidential appointees, but he was on that side as well. So he certainly is making the rounds. When he stopped to talk to, I was in a group of reporters. Actually, we were waiting for senators to talk to them, but we got word that Hegseth would be passing by. He told us in very defiant terms that he was going to stay into this, that Trump sent him with a mandate. It doesn't appear from at least how he is appearing right now, or what we're hearing from Trump world, that he is going to be pulled from this nomination. Although at the same time, we are also hearing that Trump is entertaining the idea of potentially other options, one of them being Ron DeSantis of Florida.
It's always a bad sign when other names are floated.
Right. Yeah. Right. So that's all happening all at once, where you have the nominees saying they're staying in, and that the president-elect told him to stay in. And then you're also hearing that the president-elect may be looking at other options.
I mean, usually when other names are floated, like that's it, like that's the death knell and it's time to move on. But Hegseth is hanging on. Rhonda, can we play some of the tape that you collected yesterday? Because part of the reason why he may be able to hang on is because of the mood and the tone that he is transmitting. Let's listen.
That's what Donald Trump asked me to do. Your job is to bring a war-fighting ethos back to the Pentagon. Your job is to make sure that it's lethality, lethality, lethality. Everything else is gone. Everything else that distracts from that shouldn't be happening. That's the message I'm hearing from senators in that advise and consent process. It's been a wonderful process. As far as everything else, I had a chance to sit down with Megyn Kelly today for an hour. I refer you to that interview. She asked probably all the questions you guys would like.
Okay, so I heard that Megyn Kelly interview, and I mean, he's choosing this format because it's long form. He can tell his story. It's not quick sound bites. She is a very sympathetic listener. She's going to give him really a softball interview. But he's really he's deflecting blame and saying, sure, there are kernels of truth. Sure, some of these things happen, but it wasn't me. It's not my problem. It's not my fault. And he and his mom on Fox News are really pinning the blame on journalism and journalists and reporters, James. Did you notice that too?
Totally. I mean, and there is and there is a lot of really bad behavior. And Megyn Kelly, it was a softball interview, but did tee up, you cheated on all three of your wives. Are you such a serial cheater that people can't trust you? And Hegseth saying, well, that was until I found Jesus, and you don't have to believe that if you don't want. I mean, it's still very defensive, but obviously the playbook of attacking the media and the messenger is designed as much for Trump as anyone else.
Rhonda, who did that remind you of?
It reminded me, well, first off, it reminded me of Trump himself. He was very defiant. It was very Trumpian in that clip, or for those just listening, you can almost see how he is, that Hegseth is very focused on making this seem like it's other people's problems, but he's there to get this confirmation. So that's very Trumpian. It also reminds me of Brett Kavanaugh, which is I covered that on the Hill. I remember him walking down the hallway into the Judiciary Committee's room, and everybody remembers that, how defiant he was when he got to the table. Remember, he was very combative with senators, asking him questions. So we've kind of seen this type of character before from Trump world, which may also be why Trump hasn't pulled him yet, because that sort of is the Trump brand, is to, deflect to saying that this is an issue with the media and that, other people are trying to dig up dirt on you instead of actual facts. It is factual that there was a police report done related to sexual assault allegations in California with Hegseth. There are other things that have credence. So this is not just the media making things up. We're just reporting what the facts are.
Yeah. And, it's interesting how, who does he have to win over? Who does he have to convince? So if we look at Senate Republicans, he met with Joni Ernst. She went on Fox this morning and she communicated a message of, I am not sold on him yet. Now, she didn't say, no, I'm not going to support him, but she very clearly said, I'm not sold on him yet. And our colleague analyst Roy was just on the Hill. She talked to some senators who were saying, we're going to let the committee process play it out because he'd have to go before the Armed Services Committee in his confirmation process. We're going to get more information. And that is also telling because that's not saying a firm yes. Now, Tommy Tuberville was like, I don't, show me the evidence, show me the information, like show it to me. So he's still defending him, but.
And he'll be there till the end. Tuberville,
right. That's no surprise,
that crowd,
right.
The Joni Ernst is the person to watch. It's awkward for Ernst because she actually wants the job. She wanted to be Secretary of Defense. She still is in the mix. She's one of the people being considered as a backup pick, along with Ron DeSantis, Mike Waltz, who's the Trump designated national security advisor, Wesley Hunt, a Republican from Texas. There are a couple other people.
But the reason we're all looking at her is because she is a combat veteran.
Right.
And she's a woman who served in the military. And Pete Hegseth has said he doesn't believe women should be in combat.
And she's been very open about her experience with sexual assault.
Yeah. And a huge advocate of trying to root out, stop, and deal with sexual assault in the military specifically. So you've got this real collision in Pete Hegseth of someone who would lead the military and yet is being accused of sexual assault.
And if Ernst comes out, then he's done, because then you get like Shelley Moore Capito and others who are going to follow her lead. Maybe even a Deb Fisher or some other female senators. And so far, no firm knows. I mean, I think. To Rhonda's point about the firestorm and the Kavanaugh parallels, which are very real, we have an editorial today about how just as troubling as the personal conduct is the point that he's trying to pivot to, like how lethality. I mean, this is a guy who really developed a connection with Donald Trump by advocating relentlessly for 3 men accused of war crimes. 2 of whom were turned in by their own platoon mates for crossing lines and violating the laws of war.
Trump, we're not just talking about fog of war situations, which is sort of where he started, but then we got into cases where people in their own platoons and divisions reported them.
For just like killing people that were innocent.
And Trump pardoned them.
And restored the rank for a third. And so I'm an opinion columnist, so I can say it. I think that's, when you're talking about putting someone in charge of the 3 million men and women of the Defense Department, that sends such a terrible message. And I do, worry isn't the right word, but all the personal drama, which is really a lot of baggage, distracts from the fact that that's a pretty dramatic thing to put someone with that background in charge of the Pentagon.
It's also a very like masculine approach to things, and we've talked a lot about how Donald Trump is really quadrupling down on masculinity, in every way, everywhere. So he's sort of taking that same machismo stance.
Yeah, that's correct. And also James's point is something that I've been thinking about too, just based on that clip, is when you hear him saying lethality, and also talking about Trump said that he needs to bring a warlike ethos back to war-fighting ethos back to the Pentagon. It shows you his mindset. So if there are senators who are uncomfortable with, some of the allegations, some of the sort of salacious noise around him, there's also the part of, if he does get this job, this is his worldview. This is how he will command the Pentagon. And the Pentagon is a sprawling agency. And, you're over the military. He's going to be over how America approaches geopolitics. And we already have, a lot of uncertainty on the world front right now. So it's that clip that just makes me wonder what senators will be like if he does make it to the confirmation hearing stage. What type of questions will they develop to get at how he will actually lead.
Well, this is what I can't wrap my mind around. If he gets this isn't the confirmation. Like this test on Capitol Hill of like running the gauntlet of just visiting centers and having coffee and photo ops. This is not the confirmation. The confirmation comes in January or afterwards. And then you have to go in front of the cameras. You are under oath and you are facing not just Republicans, but also Democrats who are going to ask very pointed and tough questions.
That's exactly right. And that's what's sort of just kind of, mind-blowing about all of this. This is happening very early because confirmation hearings usually happen after the president is sworn in. You will also need those senators who will become the chairs of these committees that will handle some of the confirmations. They will have to be in those positions, getting their staff ready. Like, it takes a while. So you almost think like, if this is happening now and there are these drips of allegations and other things with him or if some of the other nominees, it's a long time before the actual hearing will happen. And it feels like there's going to be more to this by the time we actually get to covering the hearing. And it's fascinating right now to watch that this is happening so early, and really the real stuff doesn't happen for a few more months.
What does this tell us about Donald Trump's disinterest in vetting his candidates and doing the kind of background checks and background interviews and things that would normally surface this stuff and then take somebody out of the running, James?
Yeah, I think Trump likes the reality show element of all of this. I really do think that he is sort of happy to let these people be out there defending themselves, see how they do, and then drop them, if they become more problematic or if they don't have the votes. We saw
it feels like The Apprentice. Honestly, that's how The Apprentice ran.
And with DeSantis, I mean, for those of us, anyone watching right now or listening, we lived through the 2024 Republican primaries. The idea of DeSantis as defense secretary is pretty wild. And I think, Marco Rubio, obviously also a former Trump opponent from Florida. And I think Trump loves that game part of it, and the idea of DeSantis having to come kiss the ring, and also that there's so much
Romney
drama there.
dinner, anyone?
Exactly.
Remember that?
That famous look on his face, and the drama with DeSantis is so fascinating because Susie Wiles was DeSantis's chief strategist when he ran for governor in 2018. She's going to be White House chief of staff. She was Trump's basically campaign manager this time, and DeSantis and his wife Casey fired Susie Wiles, pushed her out of their orbit. So as a result, she went to go work for Trump, crushed DeSantis in the primaries. And I think Susie is maneuvering behind the scenes to prevent DeSantis from getting this job.
Goodness.
But Trump world is such a wild swirl, the palace intrigue. And it does ultimately get at the idea that they didn't vet. I mean, Hegseth caught a lot of people by surprise. He was not on the short list of people who were thought to be under consideration for DOD.
Yeah, and the other thing that's been dawning on me this week on the Hill is the position that this is putting senators in, because I've seen sort of the conversation evolve to where, senators I talked to during the week where Gates, was under scrutiny, a lot of them were saying, well, we'll just let the process play out. We'll have questions, we'll have background checks, we'll have a packet of information we'll be able to look at. And those are the public comments. But behind the scenes, you are sensing some worry that this is just going to be the new normal 2.0 again, and that they're just going to have to deal with so many decisions and non-vetting from Trump that they're going to have to clean up. And
it's their mess. Right. He's just throwing them.
Exactly. And I think one of the telling sound bites that we saw this week was from Lindsey Graham, who we know is very much an ally of President Trump. And he said that he does think Hegseth is going to have a tough time getting a full Senate vote. And that's also the other leg of this. You have the confirmation hearing. I know you guys know this, but beyond that, it goes to the Senate floor for a full Senate vote. So there's another layer to all of this. But I think Graham's comments this week are also telling of what's happening behind the scenes with the GOP in the Senate.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of Republicans say about not just Hegseth and formerly Gates, but other controversial nominees of, we need to give Trump the team he wants. Trump is picking his team, and they're not answering the questions necessarily. They're deflecting about the individual names, and they're trying to just give this support to Trump more broadly, which kind of wriggles them out of that moment. But eventually they're going to have to commit or not commit. And you're right, they are being put in a very tough position.
There is precedent. In 1989, John Tower, who was a Texas Republican senator, accused of a lot of the same things as Hegseth when he was put up by George H.W. Bush to run the Pentagon, womanizing, drinking excessively. He demanded a vote. He was very defiant and said, "Look, we're going to take it to the floor." And he became the first presidential cabinet nominee in decades to actually be voted down, because a lot of times, like Gates, when you don't have the votes, you just sort of withdraw so that you avoid that sort of public humiliation. So it'll be interesting if Trump actually forces these Republican senators to take these tough votes.
I think we'll also be watching to see which of these cabinet picks is Trump the most committed to himself. Like, is he going to start prioritizing certain ones over others? I do want to mention Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are not cabinet picks, but are still going to have this potentially powerful position, although with no pay and sort of weird authority. As running Doge. They are on the Hill, as I said today. They're really a symbol of how disruption is coming to Washington, and how not just the American people and government workers, but also Congress will have to brace for it. Let's talk about what you're watching today on Capitol Hill, Rhonda, in terms of their reception and what they walk away with. Because, you know, we're hearing members of Congress be like, we've got to talk reality a little bit about, I mean, who has the power? Is it Congress or is it these Doge dudes, you know?
The Doge dudes. I hope you're going to coin that, because that is
trademarked.
You know, I've been wondering that myself, too, and that is what I'm going to be watching for. We certainly don't know what's happening behind closed doors, because these are closed door meetings, but I have been looking at some of the still photography of Musk leaving some of these offices and seeing if, you know, everybody's happy up there. You know, first of all, again, you mentioned that these two don't need to be confirmed. So this is not the same as these other guys, you know, going on tour on the Hill. But they surely need to sell whatever it is that they plan to do, because Congress does hold the purse strings. So their whole mandate, I guess, from Trump is to tighten up government efficiency, spend less, all of that. They also wrote a Wall Street Journal op-ed a few weeks ago discussing what they might do. If you read that op-ed, and then you think of it through the lens of a member of Congress, I'm really curious if Congress is going to get behind this. Because, one, members of Congress, certainly the Senate, they really don't like people telling them what to do, especially if you're coming from the outside. So I don't know how a Musk meeting with someone like Senator Thune, who he just met with moments ago, how that might play out. I know Joni Ernst, we've mentioned her, but I'll mention her again. She is leading a caucus, a Doge caucus, where she will sort of be the person to write up the legislation to create it, get people behind it. And I think one of her first incentives is to make sure that government workers return back to work. But some of the other
to
things
the office.
Yes, thank you. That is an important
Because they are working.
They are working, but to return back to government offices, also some of the offices that aren't being used, figure out what to do with that. So it does seem like they might have some people on their side, but I just don't know how these meetings are going to sit well, and if they really will, you know, if they will back Musk or Ramaswamy as much.
I've been struck by the excitement. I think that there's a lot of, you know, it's a pretty politically popular thing in the very abstract to be like, government's inefficient.
I mean, Democrats have tried to work on government inefficiency too. This is not, you know, this is not necessarily a partisan issue.
And there's a long, you know, Al Gore, Harry Truman actually made his bones and basically became vice president because he oversaw what was called the Truman Commission to look at war waste during World War II. And that's why FDR put him on the ticket in 44.
And you dropped in the name Al Gore.
Al Gore, modernization.
Right.
You know, and in fact, there are at least 3 House Democrats who've said they want to join the Doge caucus that you mentioned. And today, Tom Suozzi, the Democratic congressman from New York, tried to go to this meeting that Elon and Vivek are having, and he was turned away because they were like, it's Republicans only. So I think that
that's where you want to see the Doge Bitcoin of the dog, like with the fake eyes of like, you should have had that as a T-shirt or something on me.
But, you know, in the abstract, everyone's like, government's inefficient. Once the rubber hits the road, like anything that is big, there are constituencies for it. Right. And, you know, one of Donald Trump's big differences with Republicans who came before him is that he has said in 2016, said in 2020, said in 2024, I'm not going to touch entitlement programs. I'm not going to mess with Social Security and Medicare. And now you have Elon Musk out there on social media this week being like, oh, maybe we should look at entitlements. And that's kind of one of those things where when you talk about like if
they call it the third rail for a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, when is there going to be some kind of falling out? When is Trump going to have to? It's easy to be like, make government more efficient, but it's hard to be like, let's cut Social Security benefits, or maybe we scale back Medicaid, and so but there is a weird excitement. I mean, I do think where the rubber hits the road. We saw John Thune meeting with Republican members this week and saying because they only have, the 53 votes, it's a meaningful majority, but you need 60 votes to really pass legislation. So they're basically going to get, under the budget rules, 2 chances to do reconciliation.
And for our audio listeners, James is doing air quotes because just reconciliation, it's like a big word that means a lot, but has a simple explanation.
And so it's basically a big spending bill where you only need 50 votes to pass it.
So you cram as much as you can in there and try to use it as a back door. And in his case, he wants to do energy. He wants to do the border. What else am I missing?
And then, he wants to use the second reconciliation bill for the tax cuts to extend the Trump tax cuts. But in theory, you're supposed to pay for some of these things. Yeah. And so perhaps some of the Doge ideas for cuts, and again, it's harder. It's harder than it seems, but those could be pay-fors. Yeah. So there is a way to maybe use some of the Doge work to at least let them sort of declare victory if they can get some low-hanging fruit.
I mean, I see government efficiency in 3 prongs, right? Yeah. One is just cuts. Right. And Vivek Ramaswamy has floated some startling notions about like cutting huge swaths of the government workers like out of jobs, right? Number 2, though, is finding efficiencies, like agencies like the VA or the Pentagon, where you can really go in and try to like modernize, update, find efficiencies. And then there's the third one, which I think Republicans are very excited about, which is cutting regulations. Yeah. And that's where I think they're going to find a marriage with Republicans of like just cutting any kind of regulations they can manage to do, especially ones that Biden put in.
I'm really glad you say that, those 3 things. And then if I could add a 4th, I mean, I think delivering services better. I mean, because it is like, what is efficiency? What does it mean to make government more efficient? And I think
with some of the interfacing agencies like the IRS or Medicare and Social Security, right.
And so like potentially that's one of those sort of like customer service things where if they made some changes, you're not necessarily cutting, and maybe government does become more responsive. It's sort of the end user interface.
But what are they going to go at? I mean, this is the thing they've got to prioritize, and we'll and if Democrats could get involved in some of those, but obviously they won't touch others. But
I will say this, and this goes for not only Doge, but any other sort of policy changes or initiatives that Trump world may have in store. We just got the results in on the House, the House majority this week, and they have the thinnest, I mean, this is breathtaking, the thinnest majority that the U.S. Congress has seen in the House since the 30s, I believe.
I think it's the slimmest majority percentage-wise in like 100 years.
Yes. Yeah. So if everyone remembers how hard it was for Republicans to work in the the current Congress that's almost going to, be out in a few weeks, imagine what will happen when things like Doge or different initiatives that Democrats aren't going to sign up for when that comes to the floor, because you're only going to have, Republicans will only be able to lose 2 votes, just 2. It was 4 this term, but 2 votes until maybe April, when the special elections happened to fill 3 of the positions that were vacated because of Trump's nominees. So
when you have a 217 to 215 House, every House Republican is a Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema.
Everyone has that extra.
Also, it just takes like a sniffle and a ski injury and a broken leg to like take 2 of them down.
You cannot have a family emergency. You cannot be sick. You have to be at the Hill on time for votes.
You got to vote.
I mean, it's really breathtaking. So that's something, back to your question about what will I be watching for with Doge or really anything that needs to come up to the Hill, it'll be that slim majority that Republicans have and working with that.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we'll talk about pardons and where they may be going from here, because Joe Biden does have time to issue more. He's a few weeks yet. And then is he kicking open the door for Donald Trump, or was that door already kicked open long ago? And then we'll ask the question of who's the president? Stay with us. You're listening to Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey with James Hohmann and Rhonda Colvin. A reminder that you can also watch us on YouTube by just looking for the Washington Post. So over the weekend, President Biden announced that he will pardon his son Hunter. Part of what made this a huge surprise is that he and his people had promised for months and months that he would not do that. And you do have to feel for his staff and his surrogates who have been saying he won't do it, because he did it. Hunter was facing 9 federal tax charges. He was already convicted on firearms charges. In a statement, Biden said that his son's prosecution had become politicized, and he felt like Hunter would have had a plea deal had this not become so political on behalf of Republicans. He's also facing an incoming Trump administration and Trump people who are talking about going after Hunter even more. Where does that leave us, James?
It means Hunter won't be prosecuted, but I think it cedes the moral high ground that Democrats had as the sort of rule of law party. I've been really struck by how muted the Democratic criticism of Joe Biden has been. There's been some private grumbling, but people like Chuck Schumer declining to criticize this. People like Jamie Raskin put in a really uncomfortable position because they said the fact that Joe Biden won't pardon Hunter Biden shows that Democrats are the party that respects juries and the rule of law. It was surprising. Not that Biden pardoned him, even though he said he wasn't. It's the father and the son. And you think about the family melodrama of the Bidens. It was going to happen. But the way he did it was really striking, which was he didn't say, look, I don't want my son to go to prison. I've lost my other son to cancer. He attacked his own Department of Justice as political and politicized. He's the one who kept David Weiss on as U.S. attorney in Delaware. Merrick Garland appointed David Weiss as special counsel, and you're already seeing Trump cite Biden's own comments to ask for dismissal of the cases against him. And you saw
Mayor of New York. I was going to say Mayor Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, is like, see, both Trump and Biden agree, because he's also being investigated right now.
And so anyway, I think Biden chose to sort of. The statement didn't read like he wrote it. Honestly, it read like Abby Lowell, Hunter Biden's lawyer, and Hunter Biden wrote it. And it was sort of this like smash mouth hit on the Justice Department at a time when Democrats are trying to like uphold the Justice Department. And I think there's going to be a debate over like Trump's going to pardon a ton of people. He said he was going to pardon a bunch of the January 6th folks. Like Trump probably would have done that either way. But now it makes it harder for Democrats to say this is so outrageous. And that's where the independent media still has an important role to play. But it is like it's a huge moment, and I do think it will sort of hang over his legacy.
You make a very important point, which is obvious, but I still think worth emphasizing. He's not talking about what Hunter will face in the future due to Donald Trump coming in and possible, a resurgence of like investigations into Hunter Biden that could happen on Capitol Hill, or with Trump's Justice Department. He is, as you pointed out, talking about what happened under his own watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Rhonda, he could still make more pardons himself. Biden could still make more pardons. What does this mean about this era of sort of norm busting, and what is sort of acceptable for a president to do?
Yeah, I wonder, and I haven't been able to find any polling, or if there will be any polling on this decision to pardon Hunter and what that means for the Biden legacy. But I do wonder what it does for public trust, because I feel like we are in an era where a lot of people, and I know this from speaking to voters before the election, that they just don't trust politicians, whether they're Democrat or Republican. And I don't know if a decision like this helps any. And it's now become something that some people are expecting, that politicians are just going to do what they do. To me, the Biden decision to pardon Hunter was surprising in a way because, A, Biden said he wouldn't do it, but also because he has been somewhat of an he has been an institutionalist all of his career. Like, he's never not been in the U.S. government. So to leave out this way and to have this be one of the last decisions that people will remember, I think I'm surprised that he came to that conclusion. But I do know some people may argue that because we are going to be entering unconventional times, unprecedented, whatever word you want to use, when it comes to the Justice Department, that this was a decision he may have felt he needed to make in the 11th hour. But I do wonder what it's going to do when it comes to American people having faith in the people they elect.
And of course, there's the question, we'll never know the answer of would he have done this if Kamala Harris had won the election?
And we know, I know from my own reporting that apparently, according to two sources, Trump told Biden during their Oval Office meeting that he would pardon Hunter. And that, in the view of the people I talked to, that prompted Biden to be like, well, Trump's going to do it. One, I don't trust him, but two, then I should do it anyway, and I'm going to get out front of it. And, it is uncharted territory in the sense that, so I think what Libby was sort of getting at is that Politico had this report that Biden is considering all these preemptive pardons for his staff, for Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff and Adam Kinzinger, members of the January 6th committee.
Where do you sign up for that list? What's the process to be like?
For Anthony Fauci. But basically, if Trump is going to just weaponize the Justice Department and go after all these people, even if it's specious charges, just give them a pardon. But if that happens, it is going to become this new norm where at the end of every administration, a president just sort of pardons everyone who could get charged by the next administration. And, with the Hunter pardon, it was every crime that Hunter may have committed or might possibly be charged with from 2014 until 2024.
Was so sweeping.
It's so sweeping. And how do you do, if you're Liz Cheney, to your point about how do you sign up for this list, you could have people, if Biden actually did this, and I don't think he's going to do this sort of far-reaching thing, say, I decline the pardon because I didn't break any law, because you are essentially admitting guilt when you accept a pardon. And if Biden does it, you can be sure Trump's going to do it in 4 years. And, it is this slippery slope that we're falling down.
When we talk about norm busting, though, we have to remember some of the people that Donald Trump pardoned, including Roger Stone, including his son-in-law, Jared Kushner's own father, Charles Kushner, who now is Trump's pick to be the ambassador of France. Arguably the best job on planet Earth. I mean, James,
I prefer the court of St. James.
It's really, that is a remarkable turn of events, that you could be a felon, you could be pardoned, and you could be named the ambassador to France.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying about public trust and just how society takes this in. And if there are, trickle-down effects of decisions like this that we just can't measure. Because I do feel, just to your point, that it is just stunning that the Kushner example specifically, that he is in line for an ambassadorship. And it almost feels like bad behavior being rewarded in our political times right now. So I don't know where this goes, but when we talk about norm busting, I did a little digging yesterday into the archives back to 2001. And you remember Bill Clinton pardoned his brother, Roger Clinton. And I wanted to see, did that make a splash? What did we write about? And some of our other colleagues at other news organizations. And it did not make as much of a splash. It was almost like a mention with all the other pardons. And it did. I mean, later, people did talk about it. But it shows you that it really wasn't anything that disrupted.
Do you think Al Gore suffered from that decision?
Bill Clinton's, I think the pardon that got all the coverage right after, which was very scandalous, was Mark Rich, who was this, had evaded all these sanctions on Iran and had made hundreds of millions of dollars off of basically violating sanctions. And his wife had given huge amounts of money to the Clintons. And so that sort of overshadowed it. The other big difference between Roger Clinton, Bill Clinton's half-brother, and Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, is that Roger Clinton had been convicted of cocaine trafficking in the 80s and had served time in federal prison. And Hunter Biden, one of the reasons with the timing is Joe Biden is short-circuiting the sentencing process. So Biden could have waited 2 weeks to see, the judge might have said, look, no prison sentence. And then it's sort of a moot point. Then you could commute the sentence instead of pardon. But instead, Biden didn't even want a judge to say you're going to prison for violating for tax fraud. And so I think it was less scandalous because there were a lot of other pardons, but also because Roger Clinton had served his time, and Hunter, anyway, that's
it's hard to compare.
it is. Yeah.
But your really important point about how did it change societal norms, how did it change political norms is really, really relevant. And so we will see with time if this sort of changes the bar. And I mean, you do see this in countries that are more authoritarian and have more of a strongman presence, that there is more of a, the rich have their club and they have their perks and they can help each other, and the leader of the country is part of that and the other people don't. And so are we moving more towards that sort of ethos or that perception even, regardless of party?
Rhonda's point is such a good one about deepening cynicism that, people are like, well, all politicians.
Right.
And then kind of throw up their hands, and this belief that there's this two-tiered system of justice. And that's going to be part of Joe Biden's legacy.
So this brings us to our final segment, which is the question of who is the president. And of course, we know the answer. It is Joseph R. Biden. But Biden's doing a lot of things that would traditionally be newsworthy, especially as he's exiting the presidency. He's on a foreign trip, the pardon for his son. But the focus is on Donald Trump. And James, you were noticing that people are even calling him President Trump already again.
I had Fox News on the other night. It's fascinating to watch how they're covering all of this. It was the night that Justin Trudeau was down in the Canadian Prime Minister was visiting Trump in Mar-a-Lago, and all the guests and the hosts on Fox were referring to Trump as the president. Oh, like the Canadian Prime Minister's meeting with the president now, blah, 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 blah. I was like, well, no. Like, he's not the president now, and although who
was Justin Trudeau rushing to see?
Exactly.
It wasn't Joe Biden. It was Donald Trump.
It's a pretty remarkable thing. After the 2008 election, Barack Obama's line was, there's one president at a time. George W. Bush is still president. I'm putting my team together. And in some ways, he was using that to punt on some of the really tough questions around how to respond to the financial crisis by being like, there's one president, let him deal with it until January 20th, and this time, there's none of that. Trump is just sort of, and even in 2016, there was a lot more sort of like, okay, well, let's follow protocol. And I mean, Trump was sort of freelancing and talking to foreign leaders, and it was sort of considered, but this time, Trump's just having these conversations, and foreign leaders are coming. The Secretary General of NATO went down there, and then Trump is flying to France at the invitation of Emmanuel Macron, the French president, to visit the reopening of the Notre Dame.
Once again, one of the sweetest gigs around.
I know,
It's going to be really incredible. Yeah.
I wonder if Charles Kushner is going to come along for that trip.
He very well may.
Yeah.
It may be surprising if he didn't, frankly, since he is Donald Trump's pick to be the ambassador to France. Can you see that I'm jealous, guys?
It's wild, though. I mean, it is. Anyway, just like it is, it's worth, I'm glad you raised this.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Canada and Justin Trudeau. So let's talk about that relationship for a moment, because world leaders really are bracing for this new Trump presidency. So let's listen to a clip of Peter Doocy. This is on Fox News, talking about the Trudeau-Trump conversation and relationship.
We are told that when Trudeau told President-elect Trump that new tariffs would kill the Canadian economy, Trump joked to him that if Canada can't survive without ripping off the U.S. to the tune of $100 billion a year, then maybe Canada should become the 51st state and Trudeau could become its governor.
That is Fox News. Rhonda?
I'm interested about, the public versus the private, because publicly the world leaders will, either be here or invite an incoming president where they are to sort of, shore up the relationship, make sure everything's intact. But I do know from our own reporting that, remember when the NATO summit was here in DC, and how world leaders were quietly saying, we're a little nervous that Trump may be reelected. So it seems now, publicly, a lot of world leaders are trying to make sure that they are in the good graces of the United States.
And that they're not annexed by the United States.
Correct. But
you have to
I'll
laugh.
end it.
I mean,
do you, James? Do you? Are the Canadians laughing? Canadian listeners, let us know. Are you laughing? So, I mean, this kind of kept going. It became like a thing, right? The U.S. taking over Canada. But
so then there were, for those who are watching the vodcast, I think we have this graphic here. Donald Trump posts a AI image of himself looking at what is actually Switzerland, but is a beautiful mountain plateau and with a Canadian flag, clearly sort of embracing this idea of annexing Canada. This is Trump's sense of humor, but I can't think of any other president who would publicly make light of something like that.
Yeah, Rhonda's eyes just went big. I mean, can you imagine? I was trying to picture like Joe Biden threatening to annex Canada. And
Well, that also shows you that there is a different standard, I think, that people are applying to the incoming administration versus the one that's leaving.
And in addition to the memes and the AI generated images, the world is preparing for tariffs, preparing for immigration changes, and preparing how Donald Trump will, with decisions that some of which he can make alone, will affect the world economy. Yeah. And so it's all going to be part of the new process. Rhonda, James, thank you so much. We will be back next week, and we'll see which nominees are making news, what's happening, which countries are becoming the 51st state. I mean, I'd vote for D.C. I am not an opinion columnist, but as a D.C. resident, I'm reminding everyone we are here. Fair? Overstepping my bounds?
A very good
No,
point.
I think that's
that.
I would like to vote for senators and congresspeople that are, voting.
there was a Washington Post exclusive because DC doesn't have statehood and we don't have real voting representation in Congress. Maryland and their congressional delegation offered a deal to the DC congressional delegation. There's a big dispute over where the NFL team's stadium is going to go. Right now it's in Maryland, and DC really wants to redevelop the old RFK stadium. And Maryland has been trying to hold that up because they want the team to stay in Maryland. And Maryland said this week, look, we'll make a deal if you give us a squadron of F-16 fighter jets that are currently part of the DC National Guard, transfer them to Maryland, then we'll throw our support behind RFK being redeveloped for the NFL stadium. And honestly, my take is that that's only happening because DC doesn't have statehood. If DC had 2 senators, be like, no, like that's ridiculous. It's also the most American thing imaginable to offer to trade an NFL stadium for F-16 fighter jets. Exclusive Washington Post reporting.
Oh, excellent. Kudos to our amazing
Very good
Washington
point.
Post colleagues. Well, until that happens, we will see you all next week on Sidebar. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast app, or you can watch us on the Washington Post feed on YouTube. So find us at either place. For Rhonda and James, I'm Libby, and we'll see you next week.